Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo, and we've got a guest for you this week, Ann Christy. She is going to talk about Kindle Unlimited. Our discussion today is going to be Kindle Unlimited scams that you need to be aware of, kind of also publishing in shared worlds, and dystopian and post-apocalyptic fiction. And let me go ahead and read your bio here real quick, Ann, before I let you talk. She's a recently retired career naval officer and science fiction author. Her first series, Silo 49, was published in Hugh Howey's Wool World, and we're going to ask about how she managed to swing that. And she's also published the post-apocalyptic, I hate that word, guys, Between Life and Death trilogy, Strikers, a YA dystopian, and numerous short stories and anthologies. And actually, she first came down my radar when I saw her talking on, or somebody was referencing your blog, I think, on K-Boards. She did this huge write-up on her blog, and we'll link to it in the show notes, about what's going on with Kindle Unlimited and issues with scammers and what we need to be aware of. So we're going to ask her about all these good things tonight. Thanks for joining us, Ann. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good evening, Jolly Al, too. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Why don't you just start out telling us how you got started with writing and publishing?
Accidentally. I was actually reading Hugh Howey's Wool back when it was still in little parts with handmade covers, and I was really ticked off because I was like, why is it always the bad guys winning? And so by the time I got done with that first 5 and he was starting to get his publishing contracts and stuff, I was like, I'm going to make up one that's not bad guys. And eventually I just wrote him and said, hey, can I write this one with not bad guys? And he said, sure, go ahead. So me, scientist, naval officer, never wrote anything before, wrote the Silo 49 series. Kind of how it came about.
And were you originally thinking it would just be kind of fan fiction, that you wouldn't be able to sell it because it was his world, or did you just not even know?
I didn't even know there was such a thing as fan fiction. I had no idea about anything, but I was telling the story to someone else who was really into wool, and they were like, oh, you have to write it down. And I thought, well, I'll just send it to email to my little fellow Woolians type thing. But when I asked him if I could publish it on Kindle, it was at the suggestion of someone else. I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't even know you could really self-publish. I thought he was like magical because he got to do that. I had no idea. So.
And was this kind of before Kindle Worlds was actually a thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I got permission before Kindle Worlds, the whole Hugh Howey world came into play. So, and I'm not the only one. There were several of us. And we all sort of became friends, and there was the big discussion of who's going to go into Kindle Worlds and who's not, because we had the permission beforehand, so we didn't really fall under that contract, really. And some did, some didn't. For me, the decision was not to, because I was anticipating a transfer out of the country. And Kindle Worlds is actually restricted to U.S. bank accounts, U.S. Accounts, and I wasn't really sure how that was going to play out, and also, it was already done, so it was kind of just laziness, you might say, and then of course I had fans internationally, and they were, I kept getting emails that said, oh, I wish we could get some of these other ones internationally, because you can only get Kindle Worlds from the .com Amazon site, so that sort of made my decision for me.
Okay, and did you have to make a deal with him did you sign anything, or is he get a cut, or did he just say, no, go for it?
No, I just wrote him, and I wrote him what I thought and what I wanted to do, and he said, sure, go for it, have fun, make money off of it. So I kept the email, just in case.
That sounds like a good idea, yeah. Not that he needs the money, but, you want to be safe, legally speaking.
Right. But I didn't expect it to sell, and I was so dumb about publishing that when I put it out there, I didn't even know you could check your sales. Didn't know, so I didn't do it for over a week, and I thought, oh, that's 100 a day. That's not very many. That must be really bad, and I had no idea that was not the norm. So I let all of that momentum sort of pass me by because I didn't know to take advantage of it.
Right. And did you, how many did you do in that before you started publishing your own fiction? Or
Uh,
your own made, your own world.
right, four actually. So, but keeping true to form, I made sure that my worlds were open to other people who wanted to write in them. So, actually, a full-length novel is coming out of my Between world, written by another author here pretty soon. So, Logan Snyder. So, I'm trying to pay what he paid for me. I'm trying to pass on to other people too.
Nice. And that's not through Kindle Worlds. You're just kind of letting it be known that people can do that.
Yep, all they got to do is tell me, and I'll give them the canon, and so that they can, stick to canon, and they can do it. So,
All right, nice. And for people who maybe are afraid or intimidated to email an author, or most authors would probably not say yes, I would guess. Um, do you know anything? Would you recommend Kindle Worlds? Just it sounds like you know some people who are in it.
oh, yeah.
Is it a good deal?
Well, I know a lot of people in it, and I think it's a great way to get your feet wet so that you're not dumb like me, where you don't even know how to check your sales, or you don't even understand the self-publishing world. It is a great way to get your feet wet without having all of the responsibility, because there are some restrictions that go along with it, but by that same token, Amazon handles a lot of the minutia that we would normally handle. You can't do promotions, you can't do sales, they set the prices. So you don't really have to worry about a lot of the stuff we have to worry about as self-publishers. And I think that's a positive.
Okay, and do you know, I haven't even looked at it. Do you know how much of a royalty you get when you agree to go through them?
I think it's still 35%.
Okay.
I
And
think it's straight 35.
okay, gotcha. But it does sound like something interesting especially if you were really drawn to one of the fandoms, I guess is the term that's
Yes,
in there.
I think they tend to wax and wane, but the really big ones right now are of course the romance ones. You got the Vampire Diaries, you got there's a couple other romance worlds out there, and if you look at the top 100 in Kindle worlds, it's like love, 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 love. So
Yeah, I haven't had them approach me yet asking to use my dragon-filled worlds or anything like that. So maybe someday.
yeah, well, I mean, I think that they're going to start opening up more of them because I think it's doing pretty well for them.
All right, good to know. Well, we've been one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you was about Kindle Unlimited. So, as I
Right.
mentioned in the intro last month, you wrote a big post kind of summing up some of the challenges that KU is facing as far as scammers and things go right now.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that and maybe what's going on and why legitimate authors should be concerned?
All right. Well, I actually studied it for about 3 months. And when I say I studied it for about 3 months, I mean that literally every single day I looked at books. I must have looked at, 10,000 books. And several hundred I actually tracked from, birth to death, so to speak. And it was an evolving thing. So I think the main takeaway on Kindle Unlimited is there will always be scammers, and they will always find a new way to scam. Amazon is a huge company, and so they're going to do what they can, but scammers can move faster than a big company can. So we're always going to have to deal with a certain level of scamminess. And they became very sophisticated, and eventually the scams, near the end, right before I wrote my post, actually cut the reader entirely out of the scam. It no longer relied on customers or an audience of any kind. It actually didn't want customers to find those books. So they got super closed system, and they got super advanced, and they got super sophisticated, and they were taking in some serious bucks. And there were all different kinds. You want to know what kinds?
Well, I guess what I've kind of heard is that they were doing like putting the books out there and then just having people that pay for the accounts to get the subscription, and then they go read these books that are just full of garbage for 1,000 pages or whatever. And I don't know, is that right? Am I? Tell us what's been going on?
Right. Well, that's a closed system. What you're talking about there is what I call the closed loop version, and that's the most sophisticated and the most recent development. And essentially, they put. I mean, you can look on my blog. I actually have screenshots of literally just gobbledygook. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. And they'll put 3,000 pages of that together. And then what they do is they click farm these out. So essentially, the scammer uploads 50 versions of this, gobbledygook, right? And then they notify either their click farming collective, or they hire a click farmer. And essentially what that person does, a click farmer does, is for every KU account they have, they check out the book, open the book, click to the final page, close the book, go on to the next book. And they do that for every account they own. In a collective, the scammers sort of support each other. I did actually speak to one of those scammers who contacted me after my blog post came out saying, I want you to take that down, So, and essentially on a collective, they sort of work on a schedule. Like, this week is your week, the next week is that person's week, or this day is your day. And they all have KU accounts, at least 2 KU accounts, and they all click on everyone else's book. And those are really short-lived. They'll put up these books, say 20 books, 10 books, 50 books, depending on what their agreement is, and they'll click farm, and a week later that book will be gone. And it won't just be unpublished. It's just gone. And then they do that exact same bit of gobbledygook under a new title and do it again.
So how are these accounts not being found by Amazon? And obviously you're not Amazon, but do you have any thoughts about how they're, because I know when I publish a book, sometimes it goes right up, but sometimes it's like held for review, and I assume a human being is looking at it. So what are your thoughts there? No human beings?
Well, I guess it depends on your definition. A lot of these scammers, 2 of them I actually had very long conversations with. Both of them contacted me, and one of them is the one probably best known out there. I won't say names, but his name is used in vain quite frequently. And the way that it worked with them is that they knew that if you hit publish on a weekend or a certain time of the night, it was not going to be reviewed as heavily. And a lot of these books, the covers don't even have words on them. They're just an image. They don't have a title. They don't have an author because they reuse them. So they're egregious because they have no sentences in them at all. So if a human looked at them, there's no way they could have passed, but they were. So they had these timed so that they knew when to upload and when not to upload. Sometimes they would get caught and it would get rejected, and they would say, oh, sorry, wrong file, and then just wait till the next time to re-upload it again. So I don't think Amazon was really screening things. And as far as how they were doing it, they actually worked on EINs, which are the employee identification numbers or something like that. But because they couldn't get their social securities to do it. If you get banned Social Security-wise, then your personal account is gone. But you can go get as many EINs from the government as you want. And then you just use a new EIN every week. And as long as you pull the book down before Amazon pulls the book down, you're good. Just leave the account open and collect the money 2 months later.
All right. But it does sound like Amazon is cracking down now. Have you seen that fewer of these books are getting through? I know for a while, I know David Gaughran did a blog post and kind of highlighted some examples of these just junk books that were appearing in the top of the lists. What do you think? Are they catching some of these guys?
Well, yeah, his were actually real books, and the person who did that actually contracted those books to be written out on, I think it was Freelancer. So they were web scraped sort of books. So they were junk, but they were actual books. The true junk books that actually don't make any sense at all, you don't see those nearly as much anymore. So something has happened within Amazon to start catching the fact that these are not real sentences, and maybe they're getting rejected. I'm not sure, or the scammers have moved on to something else. But you don't see as many of those. You don't see as many covers with no words on them that are just a stock image. So there are other problems, of course. The rack and stack method. The bait click method is waning, and the shuffle method. Those all 3 are still going on to some extent, and I think it's going to take more than an algorithm to fix that.
All right, now you have me curious what these methods are. I don't want to take up the whole show, but is there
I'm
something
sorry.
we should be looking at? No, no, I'm curious. Is there, because I guess I always assumed when KU came about that Amazon had a way of like tracking how long it took a person to read a book so they couldn't just flip to the end and get credit, but it sounds like that's not at all true.
Well, as in most things, if they tell us they've got a way to track reads and how many pages are read, we believe them because we're honest. Scammers figured out that was not true very, very quickly, and they took advantage of it. And I'm surprised it was kept secret for so long. And maybe there will immediately and soon and hopefully now develop a way to find out who's really reading and who's not. But the scam depended on them not being able to do that, and it was making people a lot of money, which means they weren't able to do it. The shuffle method is where I actually had this classified originally as a desperate author versus a scammer. The ones I tracked in the first month of this were actually legit authors who were making a lot of money in original KU by having very short books, like 10-page books, and as soon as you opened them, you got $1.35. And they were putting together anywhere between 25 and 75 of these stories together in a volume, and then the title that you clicked to have down, they would have that in the back, and then have a reshuffled table of contents in the front, so that when you clicked the story that you wanted, that you actually downloaded it for, it would take you to the back of the book. And then they would shuffle those stories 75 different ways and have the exact same stories in 75 books, and each time they would get 1,000 pages or whatever it was of 750 pages of reads, even though you actually were only reading 10 pages. So I had that originally classified as a desperate author, but it became super egregious, and they're just scammers. So, and you still see some of that out there. The same 20 stories put in the same volumes, or 20 different volumes.
Right, and less people think we're talking about only like 5 or 10 people doing this. There are like you're saying variations or levels, degrees that a lot of people are doing this. I know my pen
Oh
name
yeah.
got contacted by another normal author in the genre just saying, hey, let's put each other's books at the back of our books, for promotional purposes, right? I'm like, well, you mean you want twice as many page reads in KU or whatever? So
Yeah.
my pen name did not do it, guys. She's not that she's not that desperate now. But so, and I guess maybe people are wondering why they should care. It's because there's one pool that all the authors are paid from. So how much do
Right.
you get per page? It depends on how many pages are getting read each
Right.
month.
Right. And just based on, half that pot was going to scammers, if I had to estimate. I did, for a very short period of time, actually look at all the new books that I could. And it took one genre, and I just basically looked at every new book that came out for a week. And I tried to figure out which ones are scams and which ones weren't. And I was getting like a 50-50. On a daily basis for about a week, and then I was like, okay, this is too many books. I can't do this anymore. But it's not a small amount of books. There are a lot of books like this.
Yeah, and it's kind of a fuzzy line too. Like I was just thinking with my new series, I'm going to put it in KU, and I'm like, I want to put the second chapter or the first chapter of the next book at the end of book one, so they'll buy it. But then I'm thinking, whoa, am I like artificially inflating my page count? Am I going to get in trouble for this? I don't know.
That's the sticky line, and I actually did see a few people who had been caught up in the first purge that were honest authors. And it seems like they understood the shuffle and the rack and stack method Amazon did. So what they did is they went through, I think by algorithm, and looked for how many times a same book was appearing in many volumes. So then you had people who'd been in like a lot of box sets with the same book, or a lot of anthologies with the same story, and you saw some of them get caught up in it. So I think repetition is something we honest authors want to stay away from, like limit the number of box sets you put a book in. But the normal stuff, that sneak peek, the extra chapter, the bonus content, like character cards, that kind of thing, there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think you would ever feel in any way skeezy if you defended it. So.
All right, good to know. My chapter's going in. All right, now I'm really curious about all this, and it's good to know. just one more question. I'm going to let the guys talk a little bit. But do you think do you see that Amazon has a better hold on it now? Is it? I mean, I think at one point I heard somebody actually got the KU bonuses. You know, some of the scammers.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there anything people can
Which they didn't
do?
want. Actually, the scammers did not want the bonuses. So that's when you saw that closed loop system actually get smaller, and they started dividing it up more because the bonuses put them into Amazon's radar. You don't want that, you know. I think that they're slowly getting a grip on it. I think they underestimated the amount of scammage that was going on, and I think that they've discovered that scammers are fast, and they're never going to have a complete handle on it. There are really only a couple of ways to get a real grip on this for permanent, and that involves a lot of man hours and a lot of people added to desks, which is a lot of overhead, and I don't think anybody wants to go there. I don't think any of us want to wait a week to have our stuff, you know, get through KDP to get published. And I think I think that there are some more things that they can do that they're being slow about doing, but they're doing some things, and that gives me hope.
All right, good to know. Well, let me pass you to Joe. I know that Joe and Jeff have a few questions about this too.
Yep. All right. So there's a cynical part of me, particularly with big corporations like this. Amazon notably structured this so they really couldn't lose money if there was a scam, because this is a pool that doesn't get bigger with each month. So a part of me sort of wants to know what was and what is Amazon's incentive to actually solve this problem.
And here's your answer. And let me just make that caveat. I'm not in with Amazon. You know, I'm not a big enough seller to get any sort of white glove treatment over there or anything. But I did study this, so I'm basing my guesses on pretty good common sense and a lot of operational experience with big organizations. And actually, you're wrong about the pot, because since KU has come into play, Amazon has had to put money into that pot every time in order to bring it up to an acceptable pay per page. So they were putting in larger and larger and larger chunks of their own cash. Now, granted, it's very small when you think about how much they make in a day, let alone a whole month. But it was a growing pot, and that's going to raise eyebrows. And the second part of that is customer experience. Customer experience went into the toilet in terms of looking for books on Amazon. For a while, if you hit any normal search term, you would find pages and pages and pages of scam books. You couldn't find a real book, and that's going to cost a lot more money in the long run than, you know, $7 million extra thrown into a pot. If customers shy away from the search feature, and that means they shy away from buying, and that's going to hit the bottom line.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking, and it sort of leads to the next question, where it's like, if scammers really get a strong foothold and they can't really be pruned at all, then KU is just going to get a really bad reputation. And would you say that, like, I guess, would you say scamming has been a big enough problem so far that KU was already sort of starting to chase people away, or do you think that it had never really got that far?
It depends on your genre, really. I mean, if you're a person who's looking for romance, the romance readers tend to be very voracious. They tend to read a lot, which means they're more persistent when it comes to searching. So they'll wade through it further, but they'll grumble the whole time they're doing it. That is not blackening up anybody's eye that's an author. That's blackening Amazon's eye. So I think that you've got that dichotomy there. Some people just won't, they let their KU lapse because they couldn't find anything. That's a bottom line hitter. But Amazon has a pretty squeaky clean image, and I don't think they want to see that sullied. And it did drive some authors away.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I make most of my money off of Amazon. We were talking earlier about what my distribution is between what my earnings, but like, I sort of view Amazon as like, what are they up to? I'm always a little bit nervous, you know, because of how much of my money comes from them. So whenever a scam comes along, like, half of me is like, oh man, this is no good. I hope they don't screw up the service. But the other half is like, well, you know, you are trying to get exclusivity and stuff. So I guess what makes me happy is to know that Amazon actually cares what their customers are getting, because the customers are, of course, where they get their money.
Right. But keep in mind, that's the customer.
Right.
That's not the author.
Right.
We are widgets.
Yeah.
And we cannot forget that we are just widgets. So if our heads get chopped off as they go through with their scythe, that's really no sweat off their back. So for us, it becomes a real, an issue of nervousness. We're standing between the scammers and Amazon. We're the legit guys out there, but we can easily get hit along with them. So it made me nervous.
Yeah, that was my very next question.
Wrong.
My next question was like, okay, Google Play famously shut down new author signups because they had a lot of spammy and scammy books that were coming in.
Right.
Do you think that things would ever get to the point that Amazon was going to go nuclear in the same way? And how likely is it that people who weren't scamming would get caught in the crossfire? Obviously, some of this has already happened already.
Right. Well, if you said nuclear option, you might have read my blog post, because that's exactly what I said in there. That's the nuclear option. I think that if I had my druthers, if I was actually running the operations over there right now, I would look at my inventory, which is incredibly high. They've got so many self-published books, nobody in the world could read them all. And they've got enough to satisfy customers for a substantial amount of time as well. I would do nuclear option. I would shut it down to new authors for a brief period of time. The authors that are already on there can fill up, new books to keep the new lists going. But during that time, I would institute a screening process. You get probation. So if you're a new author and you sign up and KDP for your very first time and you upload a book, it's going to be a human that looks at it. It's going to be a human that monitors what happens with you. And after 4 books, 90 days, 1 year, whatever it is that they set up to do, then you go into the front of the class and you're just like everybody else. But I would, if I were them, because of the way the scams are working now, I would go nuclear, because that's the only way they're going to save their reputation.
Yeah, it's again, Amazon has a very, very good reputation for customer satisfaction, and that's really what's at stake here. So do whatever it takes, and I just hope that I'm not one of the people who might get caught by whatever initial algorithmic sweep occurs.
No, me too. My fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, those are my questions for this section, so I handed it off to Jeff for a couple more.
Alrighty. Okay, only recently have I released my first title in the KU, and I will openly admit that I don't know too much about a structure, so listening about all these scams, it made me realize it's only obvious that they're going to try all this, but man alive. So I have the question, listening to all you guys talk about this, is if one of the readers, or let's say if myself, I were to discover a spam book, or what you want, like you accidentally, say you downloaded a sample because you see one that doesn't have, I've seen them, the pictures of the covers that there's no title, there's no author name.
Yep.
What can the person do to make sure that this scammer doesn't benefit from this? I mean, is there anything you can do, like report it to Amazon? Is there a human or like an email you can forward this to that says, hey, FYI, this is crap?
Yes. As a matter of fact, if you scroll down to the very bottom of any book page, there's an option to send things in for formatting errors, for copyright situations, for inappropriate content, and basically just click on it. Click on it and say, this is a spam book filled with gobbledygook. It makes no sense. It is a scam. Please take it away. Now, I did some experiments with this. I did this over 3 months, so I added a whole lot of stuff into my pot of bubbling evil liquid. And I took some obvious scam books, some less obvious scam books, and some of the rack and stack ones, which were a fan fiction that had been taken from the net and translated and put through a synonymizer. And I actually reported these different kinds of books, and I reported them every single day to see how long it would take for them to come down. One of them is actually still on there.
Jeez.
So the effectiveness, and you really can't read it. It's been through a synonymizer. It makes 0 sense from page 1. So I'm not sure how effective the reporting has been. And if I recently clicked on the copyright report one because I saw one that was a plagiarized copyright work that's in copyright, and I reported that one to see, okay, let's see how long this one takes, and the copyright page reporting form had changed. It sent you to another page that basically made it so that you didn't want to report. You have to go through the DCMA. We won't take that anymore. So I think people are reporting, and I think people are reporting enough that they can't keep up with it.
That's
So.
I'll say if that many of them that are out there, and there's enough decent people out there going, man, this sucks. I mean, everyone can figure out what they're doing. Okay, let's just go ahead and report it. Amazon's probably getting swamped with all these things going. We don't have enough people or manpower to keep up with this, so that's gotta suck rocks there. Okay, so based along those themes there, I mean, but obviously I was looking at I was looking at your blog post. I was looking at some of the examples where.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I have never once come across a book where I'm opening up and says, "Oh, you click here for free prizes," and which obviously is trying to jump you through the end of the thing there. Bookmarks are really easy to insert into any Word document, and that's how I pretty much make my table of contents. Is there anything authors should know when they're formatting their own books so they can stay under Amazon's radar, do you think?
Well, the table of contents, obviously, there's a huge brouhaha out there. I mean, some people who were completely doing everything right got caught up in the table of contents thing where Amazon somewhat precipitously said your table of contents has to be in the front. Although why we need a 50-chapter table of contents for a piece of fiction in the front is still beyond me. But either as it may, what that did is that actually played into this scammer, the biggest scam they have going out there, which is the secret click to the back of the book. By having your HTML table of contents in the front, you make it easy for the scammer to put that big old link back there that takes them 3,000 pages back. Amazon has backed away from that now. So as long as your logical table of contents is in order, because almost all Kindles work on a logical table of contents now, then your HTML table of contents going into the back should not be an issue. What seems to be catching their attention is any other link that is not a part of your table of contents that is anywhere in the front of that book. So no important messages from the author, no click to read a secret character card. Just leave all of that stuff out. Leave out the links to the games, to the mini puzzles, just leave all that stuff out.
Yeah, that pretty much ties into my final question in this section. There is, based on all your experience researching these various scams and what they're actually doing, what would you recommend authors should avoid doing when it comes to publishing? And that what sounds like, if you're going to put a link, make sure it's your table of contents and avoid trying to do anything else that could make either Amazon's computers go, don't think so. But
right, leave your link that is to your mailing list or whatever. Make sure that's in the back of the book. And don't have a link to that link in the table of contents. That double linking, that'll get you every time. So, keep the links minimal, follow the HTML rules in terms of your table of contents, and most people should be okay.
Yeah, because actually, I'm just thinking back on the books that I've released, and there's some of them I've got where I included in the table of contents, author's note, and it jumps in the back, but I just figured that's there. So should I take that out, do you think?
If it's part of the normal logical table of contents, because it's heading, the heading, then it shouldn't be a problem. That shouldn't be an issue. I'm talking about that big flashing link that says important message from the author, click here.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. All right, let me hand you over to Lindsay. She's got some start of the marketing questions for you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we appreciate you talking so much about this Kindle Unlimited stuff. It's really interesting and kind of scary. But we wanted to ask you about your books too, and what you've been up to and how you're selling them.
Yeah. Well, I'm a terrible marketer. I watch this podcast because I am a terrible marketer. I grew up in that whole, thing, don't talk about yourself, don't say, look at me, look at me, look at me. So marketing, putting myself out there is really difficult. So my entire marketing strategy depends on begging BookBub. That's basically it. I've got new books coming out, and so they're going on to a series that was pretty popular that Amazon liked, Kindle Daily Deal, and all of that kind of stuff. Although it's faded now because it's been a couple of years, and of course more robot stories because people like the robot stories. But how I market is I don't. I just don't. I get BookBubs and ENTs, and I interact with the fans when they write to me and on Facebook, and that's really all I do. I need more tutelage, let's be honest.
Well, those are legitimate marketing things. I mean, a lot of my strategy is just keep writing books and keep publishing books, and I buy the ads when I can, and join into the box set things with other authors when I can. But I'm kind of curious how you can market with the shared world stuff. It sounded like you don't have, well, you're different, but in general, Kindle Worlds, you don't have any say on the pricing.
No.
Do they do any marketing for you, or how do people find those books? Do you know?
Well, I'm not in Kindle Worlds, but you know, a lot of the other Woolians, as we like to call ourselves, did go into Kindle Worlds, and occasionally Amazon will do something like put it out on the lock screens, or you know, feature it on the front or something like that. So Amazon does not ignore Kindle Worlds. They want it to be a success, so they do you know, bring it out into the forefront, and I believe they do recommend it quite a lot. Recommend stories in the various worlds to people who read books that are from the original authors there. So I believe there's a really strong recommendation link. But as far as marketing them go, you can't put them on sale. So you're really limited on what you can do. I, on the other hand, am wide with those. So I've had, I'm not sure, 3 book bubs with those, maybe 3. Maybe half a dozen ENTs, things like that. I stopped marketing it because those are my first books. And you know how it is when you're with your first books and you look back and you make the mistake of reading them again? Yeah, so I don't really market it all that much anymore. I kind of focus on the new stuff.
Well, that's interesting, though. That I wouldn't have thought BookBub and those guys would actually accept the shared world in someone else's world stories. Is there any, do they give you any caveats, or did they just kind of put it out there in science fiction?
No, I mean, it's in science fiction. I mean, they're novels, they're not stories. And I mean, I have permission. So, I mean, they don't have wool written all over them. They don't have Hugh Howey on the cover or anything else like that. They just say, you know, Silo 49, Going Dark, or Deep Dark, Dark Till Dawn, whatever, by Ann Christy. And in the front, it has an acknowledgement that, you know, with permission of Hugh Howey. And I mean, that's all you need, you know.
No, that's great. Now, poor Hugh Howey, everybody's going to listen to this episode and email him all of a sudden, and he's going to be like, what happened? I have 700 people that want to write in my world now.
Well, that's the thing. Mine was 2013, early 2013, and that was before Kindle Worlds. Now, you don't need to write him for that. You just go straight into Kindle Worlds. He's not going to give permission outside of that, since he's already, I mean, I'm not talking for him, but once you sign a contract with Kindle Worlds, you're kind of, that's your contract. So.
Yeah, I wonder if you could ever, see, now I don't know if I could be so restrained not being able to put something on sale, because now you couldn't apply for a BookBub if you were just in Kindle Worlds. And
no.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No. And that's another reason that some of the people who had permission before didn't go in.
Do you know if, I would imagine you kind of get some eyes just because you're in this popular setting. Do you know if a lot of people are just grabbing the books just because it's like, oh, wool, or, you know, do they come up in the search engines and also bots and that kind of thing?
I think so. Well, for a really long time, it was in Wool's also bots. So that put them over there. Like I said, I don't market them anymore, so they've been sinking slowly into oblivion. But I think for the first year, 18 months or something, they were all in the top 10K. So, I mean, they did do well for quite a long time.
All right, that's cool. See, I'd probably still market them anyway, even if it wasn't as good as my newer stuff. I don't know. That'd be hard to give up the money.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love them, but I have other things I want people to look at now.
Sure. And do you find that any people that read the kind of, I don't want to call it fan fiction, but I guess that's kind of the term I think of, you know, shared world stuff, are they crossing over at all? Do they check out any of your other stuff?
Some do. Actually, I think some of my most communicative readers started out reading me in Silo 49. I don't write specific, like I write pretty clean fiction, so while my language was not exactly prim in the Silo 49 ones, it became quite clean, and all of my books after that are pretty clean, and so there is some slight difference, you know. And I write quite a lot of YA, although it's what I call YAFA, young adult for adults. So.
Sounds good to me. I think a lot of it is like that way. It seems like a lot of adults are reading young adult fiction.
Yeah, and there's a very clear difference. You can tell when you pick up a YA book and go, wow, this was actually written for a 14-year-old. So.
All right, so I'm curious when I look at your author page, I see that you're in a lot of anthologies.
Mhm.
Are you putting those together, or are people just inviting you, or
Just
what's?
inviting me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's by accident, really. Again, everything good happens to me by accident, apparently. But when they first started out, the Robot Chronicles of the now famous Future Chronicles series, um, it was nobody knew anything about it. It was just another anthology that would probably fail because anthologies don't do well. But Sam asked me, and I said, you know what? I'll do this. I'll do this thing, and that just took off from there. So I've had a lot of fun writing in anthologies. I've written some dark stuff to go in anthologies. It's the places where I can let my hair down a little.
And are you using any of them that tie into like your existing series to try to get people who like those characters to go on and read your trilogy or whatever you're working on over here?
I have a really firm policy on that. I do not do bait stories in any way, shape, or form. I hate it when authors do it to me, so I will not do it to a reader. I do have Vindica, which is written in the Between Life and Death world, but it is in no way, shape, I mean, if you didn't know that it was in the Between Life and Death world, you wouldn't know it was in the Between Life and Death world. It is a complete short story of its own, and it's an origin story for one of the characters. But I don't do that at all. I never tie in partial stories, ever.
Sure, but I could see where you could write a complete short story using characters that are in your series and then say, oh, hey, if you want more with these characters, here's my first book.
Yeah. I guess Pepper Inc. became the Perfect Partners Incorporated series, but she was just a short story to begin with, and now it's perma-free. So, and that was in the Robot Chronicles. So I guess in that way I have, and yes, you can write that, complete short story because Vindica is a complete short story out in that same world. But I read a lot of reviews. I know you're not supposed to, but I read a lot of the reviews, and when I look at some of the anthologies, I really pay attention when I start seeing customers say stuff like, "These are all just advertisements. These are all just to get me to buy," and I don't want anyone to ever feel that way about me. So I'm really careful not to do that.
I think that the readers and reviewers for a lot of the box sets and anthologies are very harsh. We've had like really low averages whenever I've done a multi-author box set. Even if all the books or most of them are like a complete novel without cliffhangers, maybe one was a cliffhanger and the person will be like, 1 star, they're all cliffhangers, it's a scam. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't know, maybe it's because you got it for free that you're extra bitter for some reason, but it seems like they often have poorer reviews on average.
Yeah, the box sets, especially anything free. I mean, perma-free is just go ahead and take off half a star. It doesn't matter how great your average has been. If you put it perma-free for 4 months, it's going to sink like a rock. I'm not sure why people who get them free are so mean.
I don't know. There's just you hear that theory that people who pay more for things tend to be less finicky customers, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard that often.
Yes. I'm about to take a book off perma-free because perma-free is not working as well, number one. And number two, it's like there's no barrier to entry. So people who only read romance will see this and say, it's free. It's a zombie book. Come on. Of course you're not going to like it.
Yeah, you see a lot of those reviews are like, I don't usually read this genre, but like, I randomly decided zombie romances sounded like my thing.
Yeah.
All right.
I
so
like
I think
zombie romances.
I think people might be wondering when you said, you're just getting approached for these various anthologies. Is there anything you think people can do to, they probably want to be approached too. And I usually tell people if you're not getting approached, just start one yourself, and you have to do more work, but at least you can get it going. And lots of people want to join in. But do you have any thoughts of like participating in Facebook groups, or are you doing anything to kind of get your name out there and make it so people know you're there possibly for these anthologies?
Yeah, I mean, I was just friends with the first two anthology series that I was in, and so that sort of, plus I was a nobody. So it's easier to ask a nobody to give you a story when you think it's going to be filler. You know what I mean? So there's always that. But yeah, Facebook groups. Be in Future Chronicles on the Facebook thing. Join in with your friends on the various author groups, because that's really where these things tend to happen. Speaking of being asked, I've been dying to be asked to be in a box set. I mean, I'm going to start flinging myself onto people naked at some point to get put into a box set. so yeah, getting asked to be in anthologies, it's great, but there's always more.
Yeah, it's funny how like somebody can be jealous of the opportunities you're getting, and at the same time they don't realize that person is jealous of the opportunities somebody else is getting. And we always want more. I don't know. It's the thing.
Yep. It's all a rung on a ladder, and we're just looking for the next one.
Okay, last question for me. It seems like you're mostly writing dystopian, post-apocalyptic stuff. Do you see that as a genre? I know in the last couple of years it was pretty hot. Do you think it still is? Do you think it's a good opportunity for people, or what are your thoughts as far as that?
Well, YA dystopian is, it had its day. I'm not sure. It's not as hot as it was. I think we all kind of know that. That said, people still like it. And post-apocalyptic thoughts are the human way. So there will always be room for post-apocalyptic tales. I think those are always going to be out there. But everybody jumped on that bandwagon, so the arena's pretty crowded. You have to do a lot to stand out. Your covers have to be absolutely perfect. Matter of fact, I'm changing some of my covers. Your covers have to be perfect. Your blurb has to be perfect to get people to even notice you. It's just the way it is. But yes, those are my genre. I love dark things. Matter of fact, I've got something coming out in Dark Discoveries magazine in one of their near future issues that's also dark and horrible. So yeah, that's definitely my alley, and I'm in it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think every time, especially the economy takes a downturn, it's like, okay, this is the time. There's too many people in the world. We're all gonna monetary system's gonna crash, and we got to go live in the bunkers in Idaho. So
Yeah.
maybe every time you hear somebody talking about that on whatever news channel, maybe that's the time to like, oh, let me dust off my dystopian post-apocalyptic book.
I actually have a cute little short story about that. I was on a ship, and everybody was all doom and gloom about everything, and the most books in the library that were always checked out were always the post-apocalyptic books. And I'm like, why does everybody read that? You would think that here we are in deployment, in the middle of war. You'd think they want to read cheerful stuff. And Top Doc was sitting at the table with me eating, and he said, do you know why people do that? I was like, because we're in a war and it's scary? And he said, no, because it's our way to fight against debt, to deal with our own mortality. It's easier to believe that the world will end before we die than to think that the world will go on without us, without a hitch. And I was like, oh, that's so deep. So I gotta go and watch. See you later. So.
All right. Well, on that happy note, let me hand you over to the guys to ask a few more questions.
Yep. Okay, so my first question is, you do some clever branding with the titles of your books, like Between Life and Death, Forever Between, The In-Betweener. You've got the repetition of sort of a series word. Mm-hmm. First off, where'd you get that idea? And second, how effective do you think it's been?
Well, first of all, unfortunately, the In-Betweeners is a British comedy type thing, so I'm going to rebrand that. Big time. I was thinking of it because I was talking with the person about the plot, and I was like, no, they're not zombies, but they're not alive. They're sort of like, in between. Oh, in-betweeners, So it was a sort of an off-the-cuff thing.
It's funny because I have a terrible tendency to not check to see if my title existed beforehand. Like, my most popular series is The Book of Deacon, which apparently also is the name of the autobiography of Deacon Jones. So I have problems with that stuff. And I have a book with a working title of Between, and I was like, well, I can't really do any variations on that, can I? I could have to do a search and see how many other books are named that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cute because it carries on well. The book that's coming out from the other author that's writing in the Between world is Between Kings and Carnage, and I was like, oh, that rocks this title. Why didn't I think of it? So,
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, so this is the second podcast that we talked to someone who's written in a shared world, and this is a little bit covered before, so I'll adjust what I have written. But do you think like if someone's contemplating writing in let's say in one of your settings that you've shared, you think that like there are any caveats like beware because you might limit yourself in terms of how far you can take it or how far you can expand?
Well, there's always that risk. When I designed the Strikers world and the Between world, I actually thought about what if other people wanted to write in this world, because it's a pretty good world to write in, and it's wide open. So I made sure that the entire Earth was, and I took one little spot, and I made a canon that stretches out over that entire world. So you can basically do whatever you want, and it's not going to impact me at all. I think that having a canon is key. Anybody who says, yeah, go ahead, just write in my world, and doesn't have a canon is looking for all kinds of mayhem to begin.
Yeah, I think I have had exactly one person ask if they could write something in one of my settings, and they specifically asked if they could write the sequel. And I was like, well, I'm going to write the sequel. You can, like, I was just like, I gave them permission to write something, more or less out of the expectation of them never actually finishing, and so far that has occurred. But it'll be, I'm desperately interested to see what they come up with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I have answered many questions over the course of the years at this point that they have been working on it to try to keep them on canon and also prevent them from wandering into territory that I intend to adjust in the future. All right, just one more question before we move on to Jeff. Now you've got an assortment of series. How heavily does the relative success of a given series factor into what you'll be writing next?
0.
Yeah, good to know.
Everybody says that for love or money, which one are you doing it for? And most people, I think, try to do both. For me, it's really all about the love. I'm very fortunate in that I don't rely on the Amazon income. I just want it. Yeah. So for me, if everything fails, doesn't matter. I'll keep on writing in there. I'll be convinced that it's just my cover.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of heartening to know, like, again, this is a marketing show, so we talk to a lot of people who, are very driven by the decision of what will make more money, and I often don't do that. Like, I am seriously contemplating writing a sequel to the book that is, at this point on the podcast, well known as the biggest mistake I've ever made in writing, just because I have another idea for a story, and I think it'd be fun to write it.
Yeah.
So the other 8 might get a sequel, for those who are aware of it. And I was just happy to know that there are still people out there who started writing a book because they like to write books and continue to write for that same reason.
That's me. I really do write for them. Like my robot series, oh my gosh, they sell so bad. Although the collection does better, but I can't stop writing them because the people who read it love them. So they're who I'm writing it for. If other people find it, okay, that's great. But I'm writing it for them and for me.
As you should. That's it for my question, so on to Jeff for the last set.
Alrighty. You've touched on this briefly a little bit, with regards to writing with the shared world there. My question is, what would you say have been the most difficult challenges you've faced when writing in a world created by somebody else?
Being accurate. There was no canon out for Hugh's world, so I actually went through his books with a giant thing of graph paper, and I graphed everything out, and I wrote every single detail out that I felt was part of the canon, and so that I would make no mistakes. And accuracy, I think, is the biggest thing, is making sure people stay on canon. So that's up to the original author to make sure that there is a canon that can be worked with. Like in my case, it's a giant layered wiki that you can only get into if I give you permission. So
you took the time to write out every detail in Hugh's books. Now, out of sheer morbid curiosity, how long did that take?
Oh, I don't know. It was ridiculous. It was all my free time. I don't think I cooked much during that period.
Okay, my next question with regards to your covers. You've got some fantastic looking covers. I want to look. I like the Beyond the Stars, that Dark Beyond the Stars. And I also noticed on your website that you have a lot of works in progress. So the question would arise is, how far in advance do you have your illustrator create your covers for you? I mean, is it like you wait for a certain amount of time, then contact him, or you like do a whole big batch at the same time?
Well, the Beyond the Stars, those are by a Nebula Award-winning artist who is not my hire. That is Patrice Fitzgerald, who organized those anthologies. I wish I could afford one of those covers. But in terms of my covers, I have no sense for covers. If you ask me A or B, which one's better, I will always pick the one that nobody else thinks is the better one. I have terrible cover sense. So, and I tend to do them in a bunch. I say, okay, I know I'm going to be doing 4 books. Give me 4 concepts, and I'll pick the worst one. So.
Oh, come on. I thought I was the only one that had luck like that. I mean, it's nice to see another of my ilk out there, so that was cool.
We're out there.
Okay, and social media. You mentioned you like talking to the fans and the readers, through Facebook. Do you use any other platform besides them?
Well, I post pictures of kids and dogs and food to Instagram, but I don't really communicate much via that venue. I just look at everybody else's pictures of kids and dogs and food. And I also obsessively watch cat videos on Facebook. So really, you can't talk to me about social media and have me make any sense whatsoever. I do like Twitter, but it scrolls too much, so I can't get anything decent from that. So I stick mostly with Facebook.
Are there any of those social media platforms that you feel are overrated, that just aren't worth the time to mess with as an author?
As an author, Twitter. I mean, I've seen somebody actually spend 2 years building up this massive following and then immediately launch a book right into the top and absolutely make their career because they spent the time doing that. But nowadays, it's just noise. I mean, you have all these followers and you follow all these people and you see 1 out of 1,000 tweets. So.
Yeah, every time I look at someone that I'm actually sort of interested in following, it's rare I'll see something from that person. It's usually like a retweet this, retweet that. I mean, it's like I'm trying to find an original thought, just isn't there, unfortunately. So, all right.
I just retweet Washington Post articles. I read the paper every morning and tweet the ones that are good. So.
There you go. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up my questions. Let me hand you back to Lindsay, and she'll go ahead and wrap things up for you.
All right, well, now we know Jeff is not following us on Twitter, Joe. We thought it was Twitter itself, but he's just unimpressed by what we're saying there.
Busted.
No comprendo, habla español.
All right, well, it's been great having you on tonight, Ann, and thank you for all the great information on those KU scammers. Why don't you tell us what you're working on now and what people can check out?
Strikers Eastlands, which is the sequel to Strikers, is coming out at the last day of this month. Super exciting. And let's see, what else do I have coming out? Oh, and I'll be in the Dark Discoveries magazine, and I've got a new robot story coming out in the next month or so. Plus pen name stuff, but that's secret.
Are you doing dark zombie romances on the side?
No, I wish. But parts fall off when you start describing them, and it's just not pleasant.
Not as sexy as you would think, huh?
No.
That might be a great way to get a guy to read a zombie romance novel. As I start describing that, like, I'd be interested in hearing that. I was just thinking that. It's like, that might be worth reading. I would read that.
Either that or the guys would really cringe.
All right. Well, why don't you end by giving us your website, and if you're on Facebook and want any visitors, let us know.
Okay, yeah. If you want to read about the KU stuff, it's on my website at www.annchrysty.com. That's ANNCHRISTY.com. And I'm on Facebook. Just search for Ann Christy. My boring author one is there, and also my lively person one, which has lots of cat videos. So hook up with me there, and we'll chat.
All right. Thanks a lot. And folks, this will be episode 81. You can come by marketingsff.com to check it out and put the links in so that you can actually, since people probably won't remember them, but it was great having you on, and thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for all the info, Chris. Yeah, and it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet y'all. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody.